This is the Zenfone 10, Asus's new compact flagship. How much better is it than the previous model, and is it worth upgrading to? I'm Will for GSM Arena, and let's find out in our Asus Zenfone 10 review. Very often when you see a flagship, it comes with a large screen and body to boot. Asus's Zenphones are different though, packing a pint-sized yet premium punch. Asus isn't breaking the mold with their newest generation. Looking at the Zenfone 9 and 10 side by side, you can hardly tell a difference. They have the same size and shape, the grippy polycarbonate backing, and a metal frame. There are again plenty of color options to choose from to fit your style. And you get IP68 protection against water and dust, as befitting a flagship. The display is similar too. You again have a 5.9-inch OLED with a 1080p resolution and Victus protection, but this time there's a 144Hz refresh rate. That's meant to be a little bit smoother than the 120Hz of last year. Unfortunately, when swiping around, you're actually still limited to 120, so what's the difference? The highest refresh rate setting is actually meant for games, and high refresh rate gaming is encouraged here. To turn on the 144Hz, you have to switch a toggle in the gaming overlay. The screen itself looks good. It has great contrast and support for HDR10+ video. The color accuracy can be very good too, depending on your color settings. And when it comes to brightness, there isn't a huge difference from last year. We measured around 440 nits maximum with the manual slider, and this can boost to around 800 nits in auto mode when in bright sun. For audio, Asus has brought back the headphone jack, as well as stereo speakers tuned by Dirac. The speakers have good loudness, but we felt that the bass was a bit better on the previous model. To hear for yourself and compare, you can check out the provided link. The interface of the Zenfone 10 is Asus's Zen UI on top of Android 13. It brings some custom features, such as shortcuts you can access through an edge panel. You can also launch shortcuts through the fingerprint reader / power button. You can map functions or apps to a press, double press, long press, or even a slide gesture. And the fingerprint reader itself is blazing fast and reliable. Like last year, Asus promises software support for 2 years of OS updates and 4 years of security patches. And there are plenty of gaming-related options you can access through an in-game overlay, similar to a gaming phone. And there are further options beyond that if you dive into the menus. The gaming performance is even better than on last year's model, thanks to the new flagship chipset, the latest Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. And on top of the better performance compared to the previous generation, you get support for new memory tech, UFS 4.0, and LPDDR5X RAM. As expected, in benchmarks, the Zenfone 10 does a great job, on par with this year's other top Android phones. The day-to-day performance is super smooth, and gaming and multitasking are a breeze. When it comes to thermal management, the Zenfone 10 does an okay job, about the same as last year. When in the default dynamic performance mode, we saw the phone quickly undergo heavy throttling, but from that point on, it maintained that level for the rest of the stress test. In contrast, in the high performance mode, the phone maintained a higher performance level, but periodically would throttle down considerably, which could introduce some stutters in-game. The Zenfone 10 can come with 128, 256, or 512 gigs of storage on board, and that's not expandable through microSD. And like last year, the Zenfone 10 has a 4300 mAh battery. Its screen-on results were better, but standby times were worse, so altogether we got a similar overall endurance rating of 109 hours. The charging speed is nearly the same too, as expected. The 30-watt wired charger was able to top up the Zenfone 10 from 0 to 60% in half an hour. But now there's support for wireless charging, which was missing on the previous model. Now let's talk cameras. The Zenfone 10 brings a dual camera setup consisting of a gimbal-stabilized 50-megapixel main cam and a 13-megapixel ultra-wide cam. During the day, photos from the main cam are solid. There's plenty of detail, with a nice, natural-looking rendition. The dynamic range is very good too, and we got well-exposed shots with nicely developed tonal extremes. One of the most notable differences from the Zenfone 9's photos is the color rendition, at least when outdoors. Where the Zenfone 9 is more neutral, the Zenfone 10 brings more saturated, popping colors, especially in the greenery and the skies. Portrait mode shots look good. The separation between the subject and the background is well done, even in complex scenes like this one with the wooden wall paneling. There is a 2x digital zoom available, and the images are very usable, though there is plenty of sharpening applied. If it's dark enough, the Zenfone 10 will automatically apply night mode processing to its photos, and they're the same as those you'd get if you toggle night mode on manually. These sorts of shots from the main cam look good. There's plenty of detail, as well as nicely developed shadows and highlights, low noise, and saturated colors. There is plenty of sharpening too, which can lend some details a slightly overprocessed look. The difference in quality compared to the Zenfone 9 isn't big, but we'd still give the nod to the new model, especially in very dark scenes. Let's talk about the video capture. You can shoot in up to 8K at 24 FPS with the main cam, but we'll focus on 4K quality here. These videos from the main cam are very good, with a lot of detail, plenty of contrast, and wide dynamic range. The color rendition is quite pleasant too. Thanks to the gimbal, the video stabilization on the Zenfone 10 is awesome. In the regular adaptive mode, walking shake is ironed out proficiently, pans are smooth, and if you're just pointing the camera in one direction, it looks like it's on a tripod. It can even handle movement like running, but it isn't perfect in that regard. Now let's have a look at 4K video quality in low light conditions. It's a bit on the noisy side, but it's also sharp and detailed. Shadows are well developed, and highlights are decently contained. Now let's talk about the ultra-wide cam. During the day you get good sharpness, wide enough dynamic range, and again vibrant colors in the foliage and skies. For whatever reason though, unlike last year there's no autofocus on the ultra-wide cam, so you can't take close-up shots with it. In low light conditions, you get automatic night mode processing, like on the main cam. These photos have bright exposures, wide dynamic range, and good color saturation. However, there is an orange color cast to the lighting in some scenes. The ultra-wide's 4K video quality is good. There's plenty of detail for this sort of camera, lots of contrast, and wide dynamic range. The colors are quite vibrant, even a bit over the top. And here's a look at the ultra-wide's video stabilization. It's quite good, even without the gimbal. Now on to selfies taken with the Zenfone 10's new 32-megapixel front-facing cam, which doesn't have autofocus like the Zenfone 9's did. Because of pixel binning, the selfies come out at 8 megapixels. They have very good detail and wide dynamic range. While colors in outdoor scenes look pleasant, we did find the white balance in indoor scenes was a bit too cold. So there you have it, the Asus Zenfone 10. It follows quite closely in the footsteps of the Zenfone 9, maybe a bit too closely. The only major upgrades over the previous model seem to be the chipset and wireless charging. The rest isn't really better. The higher refresh rate is only usable in games, and while the cameras are still good, you actually lose the autofocus on the ultra-wide and selfie cams. That's not to say that the Zenfone 10 is a dud. It's still a great phone, one of the best compact flagships on the market. But if you already have last year's model, you can probably skip on this one. Thanks for watching, guys. If you're looking for alternatives to the Zenfone 10, actually one could be last year's Zenfone 9, or you could have a look at Samsung's Galaxy S23. Let us know what you think, and I'll see you on the next one.